It was supposed to be the perfect life. That's what I told myself every day. Anyway, I had the house, the car, a steady job, and most importantly, a family that seemed unbreakable. But nothing is as solid as it seems on the surface. My name is Ryan Hall, and it all started to unravel the day I realized the woman I had built my life with, the woman I loved more than anything in this world, had been lying to me for years. We were living in the suburbs of Chicago in 2018. A quiet neighborhood, the kind where everyone knows everyone else, where you wave to your neighbors and spend weekends in the backyard with family. Picture-perfect existence. I was married to Emma, my college sweetheart. We had 2 kids, Lucas, our 10-year-old son, and Lily, our 8-year-old daughter. To the outside world, we were a family with everything: security, love, and a future that seemed set. But things aren't always what they seem, are they? It was a Wednesday evening when I started to sense that something was off. Emma was acting distant, her usual warmth replaced with a coldness I couldn't quite put my finger on. We'd been married for over a decade, and I thought I knew her better than anyone. But this wasn't her. She was distracted, not really listening when I spoke, and always looking at her phone with that quiet intensity one hadn't noticed before. First, I brushed it off. Maybe she was just tired. She had been working late on a project at the office for weeks, and I understood how draining that could be. But deep down, something felt wrong. I just couldn't pinpoint it. Then came the late nights. I'd come home from work to an empty house with no Emma, no kids. I'd text her, asking where she was, and she'd always have an excuse. Out with friends. Had to catch up on work. Just needed some time to myself. The more she said it, the less I believed it. One evening, I decided to pick up Lucas and Lily from soccer practice. It was a routine. Emma usually took them, but that day I had a bit of extra time. I got in the car, drove to the field, and saw Emma's car parked there. But not with the kids. She wasn't watching the game like she always did. Instead, she was sitting in the passenger seat of another car, laughing, her hand on the shoulder of a man I didn't recognize. I could feel my stomach drop. It wasn't a casual conversation. It was intimate, too intimate. I knew it in that moment. It was the way she looked at him, the way she touched his arm. It was like I wasn't even in the picture anymore. I pulled away, not wanting them to see me, trying to shake off what I had just seen. But the image of her in that car, with him, stayed with me. I drove home in silence, my mind racing, heart pounding. What did it mean? Who was he? And what had happened to the Emma I thought I knew? That night I didn't sleep. I stayed up, running through everything, looking for signs, for clues that I missed along the way. I thought about the past few months, all the small changes that, in hindsight, should have been red flags. She had started coming home late, spending more time on her phone, hiding her screen when I walked by. I couldn't help but wonder, had I been blind? Had I been so caught up in my own world that I missed the cracks forming in ours? The next morning, I confronted her. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. I asked her about the man I had seen her with. Her face went pale, her lips trembled, and she immediately denied everything. She said I was overthinking, that I was being paranoid. But something about her voice, it didn't match her words. I could hear the fear, the guilt. She begged me to trust her. But trust? How could I trust her when everything I thought I knew was crumbling around me? Days passed, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being lied to. I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt, but deep down I knew. I wasn't a fool. I started to do what any person in my situation might do. I began checking her phone. It started small, just a glance over her shoulder when she left her phone on the kitchen counter. But soon, I found myself searching through her texts, her emails, and her social media. And there it was. Messages. Dozens of them. From him. I miss you. I can't wait to see you again. Last night was perfect. I can't believe we got away with it. I felt like the world had dropped out from under me. This man wasn't just some colleague or friend. He was someone she had been seeing behind my back. Someone she had been hiding from me for months, maybe even years. And the worst part? He was someone I trusted. He was a good friend of mine, David Miller. We'd been to his house for barbecues, shared drinks at the pub after work. I had no idea that all along, while I thought I was bonding with a friend, he was building something with my wife behind my back. I felt like I was suffocating. My mind was racing, but I couldn't make sense of anything. How could she do this to me? How could he do this to me? How had I missed every sign, every warning? Was I that blind? Was I so wrapped up in my own life that I didn't see the lies piling up in front of me? The next night, I decided to confront Emma again. She had been so calm, so collected before, and I needed to see if she would crack under the pressure. I told her I knew everything. I told her I saw the messages. I told her about David. And finally, she broke. Tears flowed down her cheeks as she confessed everything. She had been having an affair with David for almost a year. At first, it was just emotional, she said. They had become close at work, and one thing led to another. But then it turned physical. It wasn't just a fling, she admitted. She was in love with him. She had been for months. My world shattered in that moment. The woman I had built everything for, the woman I had trusted with my heart, was gone. And in her place was a stranger who had betrayed me in the worst possible way. Emma apologized, said she was sorry for everything. But sorry wasn't enough. Apologies wouldn't fix what had been broken. The trust, the love, everything we had built, it was all gone. I couldn't look at her anymore. I couldn't even be in the same room. I stood up and walked out, leaving her there, crying, pleading with me to understand. But there was no understanding this. How could I understand that the person I had trusted most had been deceiving me for so long? I went for a walk, trying to clear my mind. But all I could think about was what came next. What would I do now? How would I tell Lucas and Lily? What would this mean for our family? I couldn't stay in the house. I couldn't look at the walls, the furniture, the pictures of happy moments that now felt like lies. I grabbed a suitcase and packed only what I needed. I needed space. I needed to think. I wasn't sure where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay with her. Not after everything. I left the house, slamming the door behind me. The weight of what had just happened hit me like a ton of bricks. The house that had once felt like a sanctuary now felt like a prison. It wasn't just the betrayal that was painful. It was the sheer disbelief that someone I had trusted so completely could deceive me in such a cruel way. I had always thought Emma and I had something special. We met in college, both ambitious, both driven. We built a life together, had kids, bought a house, started careers, and shared dreams for the future. But in a matter of moments, it all shattered. She had betrayed me in the most intimate way possible, and I felt like I didn't even know who she was anymore. I drove around aimlessly for hours trying to clear my head. I couldn't go back to that house, not yet. It felt like the air there was thick with lies, too suffocating for me to breathe. So, I ended up at a friend's apartment, someone who'd been through his own fair share of heartbreak. His name was Jack, and we'd known each other since high school. He'd been there for me during all the ups and downs, and now it seemed like he'd be there for me again, whether he liked it or not. When I walked into his apartment, I didn't even have to say anything. He just looked at me and immediately knew. He knew something was wrong. So I sat down, took a deep breath, and let it all out. "She's been having an affair," I said, my voice trembling. "With David." Jack's face shifted into something like concern, but he didn't say anything at first. He just let me talk. So I did. I told him everything, about the late nights, the lies, the feeling in my gut that something wasn't right, and finally, the devastating moment when I saw Emma with David. I even told him about the messages I found on her phone, the ones that cut through me like a knife. I don't think I had fully realized how badly I'd been hurt until I started saying it out loud. Jack was quiet for a long time. He was the kind of guy who thought before speaking, so I didn't expect a quick response. Finally, he spoke, his voice low but firm. "Ryan, I don't know what to say," he began. "But I do know one thing: you need to decide what happens next. This isn't something you can just brush off. You're at a crossroads, man. You've got to figure out who you are without her. Because you're more than just Emma's husband or Lucas and Lily's dad. You're Ryan Hall. You've got your own path to walk, and right now, that path is separate from hers." I let his words sink in, As much as I hated to admit it, he was right. I couldn't let this define me. I couldn't let her betrayal consume me, no matter how much it hurt. But it was hard. How do you walk away from someone you thought you'd grow old with? How do you separate yourself from a life that you built together, brick by brick? That night, I didn't sleep much. I kept tossing and turning, my mind racing in 1,000 directions. I thought about Emma and David, their secret life. I thought about my kids, who were oblivious to everything that was happening. And I thought about myself. Who was I now? What was left of me? The next morning, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let Emma win. I wasn't going to let her take everything from me. Not my self-respect, not my future. I was going to take control of my life, no matter how difficult that might be. It wasn't easy, but I started taking small steps. I reached out to a lawyer to discuss my options. The thought of getting a divorce seemed overwhelming, but I knew it was the only way forward. My life had been hijacked by Emma's lies, but I was going to take back the steering wheel. In the meantime, I moved into a small rental apartment. It wasn't much, just a one-bedroom place, but it felt like a fresh start. No more reminders of the past. No more pictures of our happy family on the walls. It was just me, and I needed that. But even as I took these steps to rebuild, there was something else gnawing at me. The more I thought about Emma and David, the more I realized I couldn't just walk away. I had to confront David. I needed answers. I needed to understand why he'd done this, why he'd betrayed me, too. After all, he wasn't just some random guy. He was my friend. I wasn't sure how I would handle the confrontation, but I knew I couldn't avoid it. I needed closure. So I called him, and when he picked up the phone, I barely recognized his voice. It was cold, distant, like he knew exactly what I was going to say. David, I started trying to steady my voice. We need to talk. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then he spoke. I know what you want to say, Ryan, he said, but I've already made my peace with it. My heart sank. How could he be so calm about this? How could he just act like nothing had happened? I had trusted him. Hell, I'd called him a friend for years. I felt my anger rising, but I tried to keep it in check. You don't get to just walk away from this, David. You don't get to destroy my family and think you can move on without any consequences. I want to know why. There was another long silence. And then, finally, he spoke, but his voice was softer now. I don't know how it happened, Ryan, he said. We were both caught up in something. Emma, she was always there for me. She made me feel something I didn't realize I needed. I never meant to hurt you, but I wasn't thinking straight. I should have come to you. I should have told you the truth. His words didn't make anything better. I wasn't looking for an apology. I wasn't even sure I believed his excuse. But hearing him admit what he had done, hearing him admit the depth of the betrayal was the first step toward healing. At least I hoped it was. I don't know what to say to you, David, I said, my voice shaking. I don't know if I can ever forgive you for what you did, but I needed to hear it from you. I needed to know that you understood what you took from me. There was a long pause, and for a moment I thought he wasn't going to respond. But then he spoke again. I understand, Ryan. I understand more than you think. And with that, I hung up. The conversation didn't bring me peace. It didn't fix anything. But it was a step in the right direction. A small, uncomfortable step, but a step nonetheless. As the days passed, I focused on my kids. I knew they didn't deserve to be caught in the middle of this mess. They didn't deserve to see their parents torn apart. So, I made a promise to myself. I would be the father they needed, no matter what. I wasn't going to let this situation define me as a parent. But as much as I tried to focus on Lucas and Lily, the reality of the situation kept creeping back in. Emma and I were still living in the same city, still sharing custody. It wasn't easy to avoid each other, especially when we had to talk about the kids. Every conversation felt like a battle. Every glance felt like a reminder of the hurt between us. I didn't know how long it would take for me to heal, for me to move on. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let this define who I was. I had a lot of work ahead of me, emotionally, legally, and personally. But I wasn't backing down. And that was the first real step toward reclaiming my life. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to like, share, and comment below. Subscribe to my channel for more stories like this. Let's keep building this community together. As I settled into my new apartment, it became clear that my life was never going to be the same. The quiet nights, the solitude, they gave me time to think. But it was hard to keep the noise of everything that had happened from overwhelming me. The betrayal, the lies, and the devastation that had ripped apart my family. It felt like a weight I couldn't shake. At first, I threw myself into work, thinking that maybe I could bury the pain in my career, but that didn't last long. Every day felt like an uphill battle. The more I tried to move forward, the more I found myself drawn back into the mess Emma had made of our lives. The kids, especially Lucas and Lily, kept me grounded. They were my reason for getting out of bed each day, but even seeing their faces reminded me of everything I had lost. I tried to keep things as normal as possible for them. I kept up with their school events, soccer practices, and even the little family dinners we managed to share on weekends. But there were moments, like when I tucked them into bed at night, where I would catch myself thinking about the emptiness of the house. The silence that hung between Emma and me every time we exchanged the kids at drop-off or pick-up. It was suffocating, and yet neither of us could seem to find a way to break it. One evening, about 2 weeks after the confrontation with David, I was picking up Lucas from a friend's house when I saw something that stopped me dead in my tracks. Emma's car was parked at the end of the street. And this time, there wasn't just one car in front of our house. It was two. I immediately felt a rush of panic. The first car was David's. I had thought I was done with all of this. I had thought I could focus on my future, on getting my life back together. But there it was right in front of me. A stark reminder that I was still tangled in Emma's lies, and no matter how far I tried to run, the past kept dragging me back. I parked my car a few houses down and just sat there for a moment, trying to calm my racing heart. I knew I couldn't just walk into the house and pretend everything was okay. I couldn't just confront Emma again without knowing what I was dealing with. What if she was still seeing him? What if everything we'd talked about was a lie? I waited for a few minutes, trying to gather my thoughts. I needed answers, but I couldn't walk in there without knowing what had really been going on. Finally, I made up my mind. I got out of the car and walked slowly toward the house. I could see the shadows of two people inside through the curtains. I tried to steady my breath. I wasn't sure what I would find, but I knew I had to face it. As soon as I opened the front door, I felt a cold rush of air hit me. The house felt off. There was a tension in the air, and I could feel it deep in my chest. Emma was sitting on the couch, her eyes wide when she saw me. She had been expecting David, not me. Her hand immediately moved to her phone on the coffee table, as if she could hide it from me. "Ryan," she started, but her voice was thin, shaky. She stood up, her face flushed. "I wasn't expecting you." I didn't let her finish. My eyes locked on David, who was standing awkwardly by the doorway, looking as uncomfortable as I felt. I could feel the anger building inside me again. I wasn't sure who I was angrier at, Emma, for continuing to betray me, or David, for betraying me as a friend. "Tell me everything," I said, my voice cold. My words hung in the air, thick with the hurt and disbelief I was still trying to process. "No more lies, no more excuses." Emma hesitated, but then she dropped her head. David, standing there like a deer caught in headlights, was the first to speak. We didn't mean for it to go this far," he said, his voice faltering. "It started with me, but I'm sorry, Ryan. I never thought it would ruin everything. But it had. The damage was done. There was no going back from this." "You didn't think it would ruin everything?" I almost laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You didn't think betraying me like this would have consequences? You didn't think about what this would do to me, to our kids?" The silence that followed was deafening. Emma remained standing, her face pale, her eyes glued to the floor. David shifted uncomfortably on his feet, not knowing what to say. "I want you out of my house," I said to David, my voice firm. "And I want you out of my life. Now." David looked at Emma, his expression one of guilt and regret, but he didn't argue. Without another word, he turned and left, closing the door behind him. I was left standing there with Emma, The woman I had trusted more than anyone else in this world. The woman who had shattered everything I had ever believed in. The air between us was heavy with unspoken words. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I never meant for this to happen." I was so angry, so hurt, that I couldn't even respond. Instead, I just turned and walked out the door, not even looking back. I didn't need her apologies. I didn't need to hear any more of her excuses. All I needed was space, time to think, time to figure out what came next. But as I walked away, I couldn't shake the image of David and Emma together. It was seared into my mind, a constant reminder of how far they had gone behind my back. And no matter how much I wanted to believe it was all over, I knew deep down that there was more to come. For the next few days, I kept my distance. I didn't speak to Emma. I didn't answer her calls. I had finally made the decision to focus on myself and my future, and that meant cutting out the people who had hurt me. But I couldn't completely disconnect from the reality of it all. The kids needed me. Emma needed me. Even though I was angry, even though I felt betrayed, I knew that I still had responsibilities. I couldn't walk away from my kids just because Emma had made a mess of everything. So I showed up for them. Soccer practice, school pickups, and the occasional dinner at my apartment. But each time I saw Emma, it felt like a reminder of the life I had lost. A reminder of the trust that had been broken. And even though I tried to focus on the good, on the kids, the memories of Emma and David kept creeping back into my mind, eating away at me. A few days later, I received a message from Emma. This time, there were no excuses, no apologies. She said she wanted to talk. Really talk. She wanted to explain. I didn't know if I was ready for another conversation with her, but I agreed. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe it was something I shouldn't have done. But I agreed because part of me still held on to that hope. That hope that somewhere beneath all of this, beneath the lies and the hurt, there was still something worth saving. When I arrived at Emma's house, I could tell she had been waiting for this moment. Her eyes were red from crying, but she was composed, like she had something important to say. "Ryan," she began, her voice calm but shaking. "I know I've ruined everything, and I don't know how to fix it, but I need you to know that it wasn't just about the affair. It was about me feeling lost. I've been lost for a long time. I didn't interrupt. I needed to hear this, even if it hurt. I wasn't the wife you needed. I wasn't the partner you deserved," she continued. "And I wasn't being the mother our kids needed. I was trying to find something outside of myself because I didn't know who I was anymore. I let David in. I let the lies build. And I made choices I'll regret forever." Her words hung in the air, and for the first time, I saw the pain in her eyes. The real pain. The kind of pain that came from deep regret. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know if I could ever forgive her. But I also realized something in that moment. I didn't need to forgive her right now. I didn't need to have all the answers. I just needed to keep moving forward. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again, Emma," I said, my voice shaking with emotion. "I don't know if we can ever be the same, but I'm trying. I'm trying to figure out what comes next." If you're enjoying this journey, be sure to hit like, share this story with someone who might relate, and don't forget to subscribe for more updates on the next chapter of this journey. After that conversation with Emma, everything seemed to hang in the balance. For the first time, I saw a glimpse of the woman I had fallen in love with, the woman who had buried her pain and confusion behind a veil of lies. And as much as I wanted to hate her for what she had done, part of me couldn't ignore the fact that she was still my kid's mother. And despite the betrayal, there was still a part of me that remembered the love we once shared. But even with that, I knew something had changed. Something had broken. The trust we had built over the years couldn't be repaired overnight. I couldn't just let go of the hurt, and I wasn't ready to move on from the devastation I had felt. The next few days felt like a blur. I moved through my routine, work, picking up the kids, and trying to stay afloat in a sea of anger, disappointment, and confusion. But all the while, I felt this constant pressure building inside me, like something was about to explode. It wasn't until I got an unexpected phone call from David that the tension finally snapped. He had been quiet for weeks since our confrontation. I hadn't heard from him, and honestly, I didn't want to. But now, there he was, calling me out of the blue, and I didn't know what to expect. I didn't want to pick up, but something told me that this wasn't over. I answered the phone, my heart beating faster than usual. "Ryan." David's voice came through, strained and tense. "We need to talk." I didn't say anything at first. What more was there to say? What could possibly make this situation any worse? "I know you're angry with me," he continued, "but I need you to hear me out. Emma, she's not the only one who made mistakes. He paused, his voice faltering. "I'm not proud of what I did, but this is bigger than us now. There's something you don't know. Something you need to understand." I could feel my stomach tighten. The last thing I needed was more secrets. The last thing I wanted was another revelation that could shatter everything even further. "What are you talking about, David?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though I felt like I was about to lose it. "What could possibly be bigger than the mess you've already made?" "I can't explain it all over the phone," David said. "But I need to meet with you, in person." My mind was racing, my emotions spiraling. Did I really want to hear whatever he had to say? Was this just another attempt at justification? Another plea for forgiveness? But then something inside me, the part of me that needed closure, the part of me that still needed to know the truth, pushed me to agree. "Fine," I said, my voice tight. "Let's meet tomorrow. But this better be good, David. I've had enough." When I hung up, I felt a mix of dread and anticipation. What was David trying to tell me? What could he possibly have left to say that would make any of this right? The next day, I met David at a local cafe. He was sitting at a corner table, his face unreadable. As soon as I sat down, he started talking. "Ryan, I don't know where to start," he began. "But I need you to understand that it wasn't just about the affair. I made a decision that I thought would solve everything. But it didn't. It made things worse." I leaned forward, my patience wearing thin. "Just get to the point, David. What's so important that you couldn't tell me over the phone?" David took a deep breath, his hands trembling slightly as he reached for his coffee. "I didn't just get involved with Emma," he said. "There's more to it. I made some choices that put us all in danger. And it's not just about what I did to you. It's about what I did to the business." I froze. "The business? What did he mean by that? What are you talking about?" I asked, the words barely escaping my lips. "What does the business have to do with any of this?" David looked around nervously, as if he was afraid someone might overhear. "I was involved in something I shouldn't have been," he said, his voice low. "I helped Emma with something. It wasn't just the affair. It was something bigger. She needed money and I helped her get it. But the money came from a source we shouldn't have touched." I could feel my heart rate spike. "What do you mean, a source we shouldn't have touched?" I asked, barely able to keep the panic from my voice. David sighed, his eyes lowering to the table. "I can't go into too many details," he said, "but it's tied to the business. There are people involved who won't just let us walk away from this. It's bigger than us now, Ryan. We're both in deeper than we realize. And if we don't do something soon, it's going to blow up in our faces." My mind was spinning. My family was already falling apart, my world already shattered. And now this? Now I was supposed to deal with some shady dealings tied to the business I had built with David? "Are you telling me that you and Emma have been involved in something illegal?" I asked, my voice tight with disbelief. David nodded. "Yes, and we need to fix this. I didn't want you to be involved, but you need to know. This isn't just about us anymore. We're in too deep." The room felt like it was closing in on me. My mind raced as I tried to process what David was saying. What had they gotten involved in? And how did it relate to me? To my business? David was looking at me now, his face full of regret and fear. "Ryan, I'm sorry. I didn't want it to go this far, but I had no choice. We can't just walk away from this." I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. "No, I can't do this anymore. I can't be part of your mess. I'm done, David. This is your problem now. I walked out of the cafe, the weight of everything bearing down on me. As I stepped outside, the cool air hit my face, but it did nothing to calm the storm that was raging inside me. How could this be happening? How had everything turned into such a mess? I knew I had to do something about it. I had to protect myself, protect my kids, protect what was left of my life. But I had no idea where to start. And deep down, I knew that the worst was yet to come. If you're still with me, don't forget to like, share, and comment below. Subscribe for more updates on what happens next as we head into the climax of this story. The weight of David's revelation hung over me like a storm cloud. As I walked away from the cafe, my mind raced. I couldn't escape the reality of it all. The affair, the betrayal, the involvement in something far more dangerous. The business, the money, the people Emma and David had gotten entangled with. It felt like I was standing on the edge of something much bigger than any of us could have imagined. I needed answers. I needed to know exactly what I was up against. But where did I start? Who could I trust now? I had to get to the bottom of this, and that meant facing Emma once again. But this time, it wasn't about our marriage. It was about protecting what was mine. My business, my reputation, my future. When I arrived at her house that evening, I didn't feel the same anger I'd had before. It had shifted into something else, something colder. I needed information. I needed her to tell me the truth about everything. Emma opened the door, her face pale when she saw me standing there. She hesitated for a moment before stepping aside, silently inviting me in. We had been through so much already, and yet the air between us was thicker than ever. I didn't know what I was expecting from her this time, but it wasn't an apology. Not anymore. "Ryan," she began, her voice trembling. "What's going on? What did David say to you?" I didn't answer right away. I just stared at her, trying to read her. She had lied to me, manipulated me, and torn everything apart. And now, she wanted to pretend like nothing had happened. But I had a job to do. "I need you to tell me everything, Emma," I said, my voice steady but harsh. "Everything you've been hiding from me. What did you and David get involved in? And why was I kept in the dark?" She took a deep breath, looking as if the weight of the world was pressing down on her. I could see the tears brimming in her eyes, but I wasn't interested in her tears anymore. I needed to know the truth. "It started months ago," she said, her voice quiet. "David and we made some bad decisions. We thought we could fix things, but it only made everything worse. We got involved in a deal, illegal money, Ryan. Dirty money. It came from people who have no problem using force to get what they want. And when I realized how deep it went, it was too late. Couldn't get out. Neither of us could." I felt the blood drain from my face as her words sank in. "You and David have been laundering money? You've been lying to me this whole time about everything?" Emma nodded slowly, her eyes avoiding mine. "Yes, we thought we could control it, that we could handle it. But the people we were working with, they don't care about us, Ryan. They'll do whatever it takes to get what they want. And now they're coming for us. All of us." The room seemed to spin around me. My head was filled with 1,000 thoughts, but they all collided in a single realization. I was in over my head. This wasn't just about Emma's betrayal anymore. This was something far more dangerous, something that could destroy everything I had built. "Why didn't you tell me?" I demanded. "Why didn't you come to me for help? I could have helped you. I could have." "I was afraid," Emma interrupted, her voice breaking. "I thought I could protect you, protect the kids. I didn't want you involved in any of this. I thought if I just kept everything from you, we could get out of it. But now it's too late." I took a step back, my mind reeling. I didn't know what to say. How could I possibly process everything she had just confessed? And how could I protect my family from this mess? "I'm sorry, Ryan," she whispered. "I never wanted this for us. I never meant for it to go this far." But the words felt hollow. They didn't mean anything anymore. The damage was done. "Where is David now?" I asked, trying to focus on the one thing I could control. "He's gone," Emma said. "He disappeared after he told me the truth. He's scared, Ryan. And I think I think he's trying to protect himself. I felt a rush of anger surge through me. I wasn't going to let David or anyone get away with this. They had dragged me into their mess, and now I had to find a way to protect myself. And if that meant confronting the people behind this scheme, then that's exactly what I was going to do. I looked at Emma, my eyes hardening. I can't do this anymore, Emma. I can't live in this house with the lies, with the fear. I'm taking the kids. I don't know what you're going to do, but I can't let them get caught in the middle of this. Her eyes widened with panic. Ryan, please. You can't just. I have to, I said firmly. I'm not going to let you drag them into your mistakes. I'm not going to let you put them in danger. And with that, I turned and walked out of her house, feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders. I wasn't sure what came next, but I knew one thing. I had to protect my kids. I had to keep them safe no matter what. For the next few days, I kept my distance from Emma, focusing on keeping the kids out of the mess she had created. But I knew that the danger wasn't just going to go away. The people Emma and David had gotten involved with weren't going to let us off the hook so easily. They would come after me. They would come after my family. The tension continued to rise as I waited for the storm to hit. And sure enough, it did. One afternoon, as I was picking the kids up from school, I got a call from an unknown number. My heart skipped a beat as I answered, unsure of what to expect. Ryan Hall. A deep voice on the other end of the line said, "We know what you've been up to, and we're not done with you yet." I froze. My hands began to shake as I realized what this meant. The people behind the money laundering scheme had found me. They knew what I knew, and they were coming for me. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, trying to sound calm, trying to buy myself some time. "Oh, you know exactly what we're talking about," the voice replied, the malice in their tone clear. "We'll be in touch. And if you don't do what we say, your little family will be the least of your worries." The line went dead, and I stood there, my heart pounding. Couldn't breathe. The fear was suffocating. I knew it was only a matter of time before they came for me, before they made their move. I had to act. I had to figure out how to fight back, how to protect myself and my kids. I had already lost everything that mattered to me, but I wasn't going to lose my family too. If you've been following along, be sure to hit like, share this with someone who might need to hear this, and don't forget to subscribe for more updates on what happens next. The storm is just beginning, and we're heading into the final chapter of this wild ride. I knew the moment I got that call, things had gone from bad to worse. The warning I had received was clear. The people Emma and David had gotten involved with weren't just some shady characters. They were dangerous. And now they were coming for me. The thought of them coming after my family hit me like a physical blow. I had already lost my marriage, my trust in Emma, and my own sense of security. But the idea that my children, Lucas and Lily, might be dragged into this mess made my blood run cold. I spent the next few days on edge, constantly looking over my shoulder, trying to keep my movements under control, trying to protect my kids as best I could. I wasn't sure what these people wanted from me, but I had a sinking feeling that they weren't just going to let things go. One evening, I was sitting in my apartment, staring at the empty walls, when the phone rang again. I hesitated before picking it up. My hands were sweating, and my heart was hammering in my chest. This time, the voice on the other end was different. It was calmer, smoother. There was no malice or threats, just business. "You've been warned, Ryan," the voice said. "We can make this easy for you, or we can make it difficult. We know about your business. We know everything about you, and we know how to make sure you stay out of this mess. We just need you to cooperate. But if you don't, things will get complicated. For you and your family." I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "What do you want from me?" The voice chuckled lightly. "Simple. Stay out of our way. Don't ask too many questions. Don't interfere. And we'll leave you and your little family alone." There was a long pause. I could feel the weight of the silence on the other end of the line. "And if I refuse?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The tone shifted. "Well, that's where things get tricky. If you refuse, we can't promise that the situation won't escalate. But Ryan, think about your children. You don't want them to be a part of this. You don't want to put them in danger. The threat was implied, but it hit me harder than I expected. They knew everything. My family, my business, and most terrifyingly, my vulnerabilities. My mind raced. What could they be capable of? What would they do to hurt me? I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. I don't care what you think you know. I'm not going to just roll over for you. There was a long, quiet pause before the voice spoke again. We'll see about that. The line went dead, and I was left in the silence of my apartment, the weight of their words pressing down on me. My heart pounded in my chest, the adrenaline coursing through my veins. My whole world was spiraling out of control, and I was just trying to hold on. I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't let them win. Not now. Not after everything that had happened. But I also knew I couldn't take them on alone. I needed help. I needed someone who could help me protect my family and navigate this dangerous situation. The first person I thought of was Jack. He had been through his own struggles, and I knew he could help me think clearly. I called him immediately. "Jack, I need you," I said, my voice tight with urgency. "They're coming for me. I don't know how to get out of this. I don't know what to do." Jack's voice was calm on the other end. "All right, take a breath. Let's figure this out." For the next hour, we talked about my options. He was practical, calm. Everything I wasn't in that moment. Together, we came up with a plan. The first step was to gather as much information as I could. I needed to know who these people were, what they were after, and how deep they were involved in Emma and David's mess. Jack had connections. He worked with a few people who could dig into the background of just about anyone. I needed to get my hands on some answers fast. By the end of the call, I had a plan. It wasn't foolproof, but it was the best option I had. Jack would contact his sources and get the intel I needed. In the meantime, I would keep my head down, protect the kids, and prepare for whatever might come next. But as I hung up the phone, I felt the weight of the situation sink in. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for my kids, for their safety, and that made everything more complicated. Later that night, as I tucked Lucas and Lily into bed, I kissed them goodnight and stood there for a moment, watching them sleep. They had no idea what was going on. They didn't know how close they were to danger. All they knew was that their lives were about to be uprooted. I promised myself I would do whatever it took to keep them safe, even if that meant risking everything. The next day, I received a call from Jack. He had information. The people Emma and David were involved with weren't just ordinary criminals. They were connected to a larger network, one that had ties to organized crime. They weren't just dealing with dirty money. They were laundering funds for a powerful syndicate that had fingers in many pies. If I didn't comply with their demands, it was clear they would make good on their threats. I felt my stomach turn. This wasn't just a business problem anymore. It was a life-and-death situation. These people didn't care about who I was or what I had built. They cared about their money, their power, and they would do anything to protect that. The stakes had never been higher. Jack's voice cut through my thoughts. "I'm going to help you, Ryan. We'll get through this. But you have to stay calm. You have to stay focused." I nodded, even though I wasn't sure how much longer I could hold it together. Everything I thought I knew about my life was falling apart. And the more I learned, the deeper I seemed to sink into a world I didn't belong in. But Jack was right. I had to stay focused. I had to protect my family. And if that meant facing down these criminals head-on, then that's what I would do. The next few days were a blur of preparation and constant vigilance. I knew they were watching me. I knew they were waiting for me to slip up. I couldn't afford to make any mistakes. But the pressure was building and I could feel it. The confrontation was coming. And when it did, it would be the defining moment of my life. As you follow along with this journey, don't forget to like, share, and comment below. Stay with me as we reach the final stretch of this wild ride. You won't want to miss what happens next. The days leading up to the confrontation felt like a countdown to disaster. The pressure was mounting, and with every call, every strange glance from the people around me, I knew I was being watched. The threat was real, and the stakes were higher than ever. My family was in danger, and there was no escaping this nightmare I had been dragged into. The last few weeks had been a blur of fear and anticipation. Every time the phone rang or someone knocked on my door, my heart would race, expecting the worst. Couldn't relax. Couldn't let my guard down. But it wasn't just the danger I was facing. It was the weight of the decisions I had made. The choices I'd made to protect my kids, to keep them out of the mess Emma and David had created. But it was all closing in on me now. I had no more time to hide. No more time to second-guess myself. It was the morning after I'd spoken to Jack, when I finally received the call that would change everything. The voice on the other end was calm, almost too calm, as if they had been waiting for this moment. I had no idea what would come next, but I could feel the tension in the air. "Ryan," the voice said, cold and direct. "It's time for you to make your choice. We've given you the chance to step aside, to let us handle things. But you've refused. Now you have two options. You can comply and we'll leave your family out of this, or you can continue to resist and you'll regret it. The choice is yours." I swallowed hard, my breath catching in my throat. The words hung in the air like a bomb about to detonate. They had played their hand, and now it was my turn. My mind raced. There was no way I was just going to give in to these people. But the thought of what they could do to my kids, to the people I loved, was terrifying. "I'm not backing down," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "You don't scare me." The voice didn't respond immediately. The silence was suffocating. Then, finally, it spoke. "We'll see." And just like that, the call ended. I stood there, frozen in place, the phone still in my hand. I felt a surge of adrenaline, mixed with fear. It was time. There was no turning back now. I called Jack immediately, telling him everything. He was calm, focused, telling me that we had to stick to the plan. We couldn't let these people control our lives. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this was the beginning of the end. The moment when everything would fall apart. Over the next few days, I kept my head down, staying away from public places and keeping a low profile. But every time I heard a knock at the door or a car pull up outside, I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. It was only a matter of time before the confrontation came. And then it happened. I had just finished a meeting with my lawyer when I got the call. It was from an unknown number, and my heart skipped a beat as I answered. I had no idea what was coming next, but I was ready for whatever they threw my way. "This is your final warning," the voice said, their tone chilling. "We've given you plenty of chances to walk away, but you've refused everyone. Now we're taking matters into our own hands." Before I could respond, I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps behind me. I whipped around, my heart racing, only to find a man standing in the doorway of my office. He was tall, imposing, wearing a suit that made him look out of place in my otherwise normal world. I knew right away that he wasn't just anyone. He was one of them. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice shaky but filled with determination. "What do you want?" The man didn't respond at first. He just stood there, staring at me with cold, calculating eyes. I could see the power in him. He wasn't just a henchman, he was someone important, someone connected. This was the moment I had been dreading, the moment where everything would change. "I've been sent to make sure you understand the consequences of your actions," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You've made a mistake by refusing to cooperate, Ryan, but it's not too late to fix it." I took a step back, my mind racing. I had to think quickly. I had to protect myself. I wasn't going to let them intimidate me, but the fear that gripped me was real. I knew they were capable of anything. "What do you want from me?" I demanded, trying to steady my breathing. I wasn't sure if I could keep my composure much longer. The man stepped closer, and I could feel the tension in the room increase. He wasn't just threatening me, he was looking for a reaction. He wanted me to be afraid. "You'll find out soon enough," he said. "But if you know what's good for you, you'll start thinking about your family. Because we're not just after you, Ryan. We're after everything you care about." The words hit me like a punch in the stomach. My family. They were threatening my kids, my future. I couldn't let this happen. I couldn't let them take everything from me. The man took a step closer, his eyes narrowing. Don't make this more difficult than it has to be. You'll be given one final opportunity to cooperate. If you refuse again, well, let's just say things will get very complicated. I stood my ground, but inside, I was crumbling. My mind was racing. I couldn't let them hurt my family. But what were my options? What could I do to stop them? And then, without warning, he turned and walked out of the office, leaving me standing there in stunned silence. The door slammed shut behind him, and I was left alone with my thoughts. I immediately called Jack, my hands trembling. I told him everything that had just happened, every word the man had said. Jack's voice on the other end of the line was calm but firm. "Ryan, they're pushing you into a corner," he said. "But we can't back down. This isn't just about you anymore. We have to protect your family, and we're not going to let these people get away with it. I'll take care of the next steps, but you have to stay calm. We're going to fight back." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. Jack was right. I couldn't let fear dictate my actions. If I wanted to protect my kids, I had to stand my ground. But with each passing moment, I knew the danger was growing. The clock was ticking, and I had no idea how much longer I had before it was too late. Stay tuned, because the final confrontation is just around the corner. If you're still with me, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more updates as the story heads towards its dramatic conclusion. The moment the door slammed behind the man, I was left standing in the same place, my heart racing. His words echoed in my mind. "We're not just after you, Ryan. We're after everything you care about." The threat wasn't vague. It was personal. They didn't just want to intimidate me. They were trying to break me. They knew where it would hurt the most, my family. I didn't know what to do next. How do you fight back when the people threatening you have all the power? How do you protect your children when they've already made it clear they'll stop at nothing to get what they want? I knew I couldn't give in. I couldn't let these people destroy what little I had left. But the fear was real. These people weren't playing by the rules. And the worst part was the clock was ticking. I didn't have much time. I called Jack again. His voice was calm, like he had been expecting this. "Ryan, it's time we take action. We need to strike first." The words hit me like a jolt of electricity. He was right. They were already making moves, so it was time for us to do the same. I couldn't sit back and wait for them to make the first move. If they were going to hurt my family, I needed to stop them. But how? How do you fight back against a criminal syndicate that's willing to go to any lengths? Jack and I began to put a plan into motion. His sources had gathered more information, and we now knew a little more about who we were dealing with, an underground network with ties to organized crime. They were ruthless, and they had resources I couldn't even begin to fathom. But we had one thing on our side: surprise. We knew they were watching, but they didn't know we were onto them. We set a meeting, somewhere quiet and out of the way, where I could have a conversation with someone who might be able to help us. I wasn't about to wait for another knock on my door. I needed to make sure I had all my bases covered, so we planned for every possibility. The meeting spot was a small, rundown bar at the edge of town. I didn't know who to trust anymore, but I had to take the risk. Jack's source had promised to be there, and I had no other choice but to show up and hope this didn't end in disaster. When I arrived, the place was nearly empty. A few people were sitting at the bar, nursing their drinks, their faces hidden in the shadows. I scanned the room and spotted a man sitting in the back booth. He had a tired, weathered look to him, but his eyes were sharp. He stood as I approached, and without a word, led me to the booth. "Ryan," he said, his voice low and quiet. "I know why you're here." I sat down, trying to read him. "I need information. I'm being threatened, and it's not just me. It's my family. I need to know who's behind this, who I'm dealing with." The man nodded, scanning the room one last time before leaning forward. "You're in over your head, but I can help you. They're called the Vori, an old Russian syndicate. They've been operating in the shadows for years. They don't care who they hurt, Ryan. They don't have rules. They do business in blood." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. The Vori, the most feared criminal organization in the world. The thought of my family getting caught in their web sent a wave of panic through me. "They've got eyes everywhere. But you're not completely alone, the man continued. I've got some people who can help, but you've got to be willing to do whatever it takes to get out of this alive. I didn't hesitate. I'm in. What do we need to do? The man slid a piece of paper across the table, scribbled with a name and an address. This is the key to getting out. The man you need to talk to is there. He can help you shut this down before it gets worse. But be careful. He's not someone you want to cross. I nodded, pocketing the paper. I didn't know who this man was, or if I could trust him. But right now, I didn't have the luxury of doubt. My family's safety was on the line. I had to take the risk. I left the bar, my mind spinning. Jack was waiting for me outside. I told him what I had learned. His face grew more serious as I mentioned the Vori. He had heard of them before. Everyone had. They were notorious for leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. You're playing with fire now, Ryan, Jack warned. This isn't just about your family anymore. This is bigger than that. You need to be ready for whatever happens next. I nodded, trying to steady myself. The closer I got to the truth, the more dangerous it became. But I couldn't back down now. I couldn't let fear control me. The next morning, I made my way to the address on the paper. It led me to a quiet, industrial part of town. A place where the city's underbelly hid in plain sight. The building was old, abandoned-looking, with a single flickering light above the door. My stomach churned as I approached. I knocked once, twice. There was a long silence before the door creaked open, revealing a man I didn't recognize. He was taller than me, broad-shouldered, with a scar running down the left side of his face. His eyes were cold, unblinking. "Are you Ryan Hall?" he asked, his voice gruff. I nodded, not sure if this was the man I was supposed to trust. "I've been expecting you," he said, stepping aside and letting me in. "But you're walking into a war, Ryan. And when it comes to the Vori, there's no such thing as a clean fight." He led me down a narrow hallway into a back room. Inside was a man sitting behind a desk, his face hidden in shadows. He looked up as I entered, his eyes piercing through the dim light. "Ryan Hall," he said, his voice calm but laced with authority. "I know why you're here, and I know what you're up against." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What do I need to do?" The man smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. "You need to fight back. You need to take control. But first, you need to trust me." I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what came next. There was no turning back. This was the final step in a fight for my family's future. I didn't know what would happen in the end, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going down without a fight. Keep watching, because the next chapter of this story is going to be intense. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more updates. Things are about to get even more dangerous. The moment I stepped into that back room, everything I had been fighting for felt like it had led to this. I had finally made it to the last step in my fight for my family's safety, and everything depended on what happened next. I was standing in front of the man who could either be my savior or my end. The room was dark, the weight of the situation pressing down on me, but I knew I couldn't afford to hesitate any longer. "Trust me," the man said. His words were simple, but they carried the gravity of everything that had happened to me, everything that had been stolen from me. I nodded, though every part of me was screaming with doubt. But there was no turning back now. My only option was to face the truth head-on and hope that this plan would work. The man, whose name I learned was Victor, handed me a small device, a phone that wasn't tied to any network. It was one of their tools used to communicate without leaving a trace. "We'll contact you when it's time, but until then, you keep your head low. They'll be watching." I took the device and nodded. It felt like a small lifeline in the chaos, but deep down, I knew that the battle was far from over. Victor told me that he had contacts who could disrupt the syndicate's operations, but it would take time. Time that I wasn't sure I had, given the threats that had been made against my children. I left the meeting with my mind racing. Jack had been right about one thing. I was in over my head. But I wasn't going to let that stop me. I had already lost so much, and I wasn't about to lose everything. The days after that meeting were a blur. I kept my movements quiet, staying out of sight. But as the hours passed, I felt the weight of the danger pressing in on me. I knew that the Vori wouldn't just let me walk away. They would come for me. They would come for my kids. And when they did, I had to be ready. And then, as the sun began to set on another tense evening, the phone rang. It was Victor. "It's time," he said, his voice calm, but there was an underlying tension in his tone. I didn't need any further explanation. I had been waiting for this moment, bracing myself for what was to come. The plan we had set in motion had finally come to a head. Victor's contacts were in place, and we were about to launch our final strike. I called Jack, and together we prepared for the confrontation. We weren't just going up against the Vori anymore. This was bigger. There was a part of me that knew I would have to confront more than just the criminals. I would have to face my own past, the choices that had led me to this point, the lies I had believed, and the trust one had misplaced. The time for being passive was over. I was about to take control. The confrontation came swiftly. Armed with the knowledge and resources Victor had provided, I went to the location where the syndicate had been operating. The place was nondescript, hidden in plain sight, just another rundown building in a forgotten corner of the city. But inside it was anything but ordinary. I walked in, and everything seemed to freeze. The weight of everything, the decisions, the dangers, hit me all at once. I knew I had to end this, but I had no idea what that meant. How far was I willing to go to protect my family? There, in the center of the room, stood the man I had feared most, the leader of the Vori. His cold eyes locked onto mine as I stepped forward, each step echoing through the silence. "You shouldn't have come here, Ryan," he said. "You're playing a dangerous game." I felt a surge of anger. "I'm done playing games. You've hurt my family. You've threatened my kids. That ends today." The words left my mouth with a finality I hadn't expected. There was no more fear, no more hesitation. I had made up my mind. This was the moment when everything changed. The leader smirked, his hand brushing against a table full of scattered papers. "You think you can stop us? You think you can walk away from this unscathed? You're in deeper than you know." "I don't care how deep it goes," I said, my voice steady despite the fear simmering beneath. "You're not getting away with this." A brief pause hung between us before the room erupted into chaos. Gunshots rang out, and I ducked instinctively, adrenaline pushing me to move faster than I ever had before. It was happening. Everything I had been fighting for was coming to a head. The next few moments felt like a blur. There were people yelling, scrambling, but I kept my focus on the man in front of me. The fight was far from over, but I had something on my side that they didn't. Resolve. I wasn't going to lose my family, not like this. As the dust settled, I stood face to face with the man who had made my life hell. His eyes flickered with recognition, and there was something in his gaze that told me I had won. In the end, it wasn't just about taking them down, it was about standing my ground and showing them I wasn't afraid. I don't know how long it took for the authorities to arrive. I don't know how much of the syndicate was dismantled that day. But what I did know was that I had fought back. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had control over my life again. The aftermath wasn't easy. It took time for the dust to settle, for the full scope of the damage to sink in. But one thing was clear. I had changed. I had grown stronger, more determined. I had learned that no matter how far someone pushed me, I had the power to stand up, to protect what mattered. And as I looked at my kids, as I watched them laugh and play in the yard, I realized something. I had found my way back. The road to this point had been long and filled with obstacles, but I wasn't the same person I had been when this all started. I was better, wiser, and I had learned one important lesson: family, loyalty, and above all, never back down from the things that matter. I was finally free. Thank you for sticking with me through this journey. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to hit the like button, share this video, and subscribe for more content. There's more to come, and I can't wait to bring you along for the next adventure.